Good afternoon, everyone.
We've lost Mark-Q.
I think we did. Okay.
Well, that's okay. So she introduced all staff. Ms. Finley, did she introduce you also?
No. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the school psychologist.
All right, so we have our core team for getting started right now with us. We'll let Ms. Mark-Q back in. We'd like to just start by saying that we understand and truly recognize how difficult a situation this has been for the first week of school. It being the first week of school and everyone being so excited to be back in the building, starting a new year, a fresh start, and then having to come out for remote learning and the uncertainties of knowing the day-to-day schedule going forward. So we want you guys to all know that we recognize how frustrating it is as a staff member, as a parent, as a family, as an OCS community. Ms. Mark-Q, welcome back.
Yep, I'm back. Sorry about that. So we want to be as transparent as possible with you and tell you everything we know. Please feel free to interrupt me, write a question in the chat or anything that you feel that is that you want to know more about. I will do the best I can to tell you everything that this team knows.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Ms. Mark-Q, we did forget for Ms. Hazel or Ms. Pacheco to jump in and co-translate for us.
Buenas tardes, estamos aquí esta tarde para discutir o aclarar las informaciones que tenemos sobre la razón por cual nosotros tuvimos que cerrar las clases. Esperemos que todo estén bien, pero esta reunión es para ver cómo podemos comunicarnos con ustedes para aclarar todo lo que ha pasado en la semana que ha pasado ahora.
Ready to go?
Yes.
So I'm going to try to do this in the timeline that the events happened so that you have some idea of how our decisions were made. On September 9th and 10th, OCS conducted testing through Mount Sinai Hospital. And that was so we could do some gateway testing for staff and students prior to the school year starting.
Okay, vamos a comenzar dándole todo lo que ha pasado en el tiempo que pasó. El 10 de septiembre abrimos la escuela, comenzamos haciendo pruebas de COVID. Es una prueba general que hicimos a la escuela entero para saber quién estaba contaminado antes de entrar a la escuela.
We started school on September 13th. And it was absolutely beautiful. The students were so excited. It was so nice to see the classrooms going on. All students were 3 feet apart. They were masked. All the teachers were there. And it was just such an exciting few hours until around in the morning, we did hear that we had a positive COVID case of a student in the school.
Comenzamos el 13 y todo comenzó normal, bien lindo. Los profesores estaban listos, los estudiantes tenían la mascarilla, todo el mundo estaba en su lugar como tenía que ser, todo estaba bien hasta que a mitad de mañana conseguimos la noticia que un estudiante tenía la prueba hecha y estaba positiva.
As soon as we heard of that positive case, we were able to remove the students from the classroom, and we contacted what is called the Situation Room. The Situation Room is a combination of the Department of Health, Track and Trace, and the Department of Education to report the case, which is what we have to do because it is that Situation Room that then tells us exactly what we have to do based on the positive case.
Cuando nos dimos cuenta que la estudiante tenía la prueba hecha y estaba positiva, nosotros no manejamos como no es requerido manejarnos, que es llamar al Situation Room. Es una oficina en la ciudad. Esa oficina trabaja en conjunto con el Departamento de Salud, el Departamento de Educación y las personas que hacen el seguimiento de las personas que salen con pruebas positivas en el estado. Cuando nos comunicamos con ellos, ellos luego nos dejaron saber qué teníamos que hacer.
The Situation Room informed us that evening that the students who were in the classroom had to have what is called a partial classroom closure, which means that if the child is vaccinated and asymptomatic, they can return to school. However, at that point, an unvaccinated child has to go into a 10-day quarantine.
En ese entonces nos dijeron de la oficina de la situación que teníamos que cerrar la aula donde estaba la estudiante que salió positiva con COVID. El reglamento fue que si el estudiante estaba positivo, los estudiantes que estaban en la clase donde estaba la estudiante positiva no podían volver a la escuela si no tenían su vacuna. Entonces, esa clase fue cerrada el lunes por las direcciones que conseguimos del Departamento de Salud y la oficina que le describí anteriormente, que se llama la Situation Room.
With that classroom closure, we were able to open on Tuesday and have school, and we were able to open on Wednesday and have school, and everything was going great. And then on Thursday, we had a day off. On that Thursday during the day, we got a report of a positive case from a staff member.
So, todo fue bien, cerramos esa clase y con el cierre de esa clase pudimos seguir el martes con clases normales, seguimos el miércoles con clases normales. Eso no tuvo una interrupción del cerramiento general. Entonces pudimos seguir normal con esa clase, estar cerrada. Estábamos fuera el jueves y la situación cambió el viernes.
Ms. Marquez, I'd like to just add in there that from that situation, the first initial situation, there were a few teachers who had to begin quarantining then, but we were able to minimize the amount of staff members. That's why we were able to function for the days following with, the teachers that we had as well as administration.
Queremos aclarar también que aunque hubieron estudiantes que estaban positivos de COVID en la clase, nosotros pudimos minimizar la situación la situación y pudimos seguir trabajando porque aunque había una estudiante positiva, los profesores que estuvieron en contacto con ese estudiante no fueron afectados de tal manera que necesitábamos cerrar en general.
Once we reported the case to the situation room on Thursday, we then have to wait for the situation to determine next steps. As we were waiting and looking at close contacts, we realized that Friday might be difficult to open. We called the sub-agencies, and the sub-agencies were short substitute teachers because this problem isn't just an OCS problem, but it's a New York City problem, and therefore the sub-agencies do not have many subs to offer out.
Entonces, el jueves, cuando nos dimos cuenta que la situación era más grande y que habían otras personas que estaban contaminadas o infectadas con el COVID, nosotros teníamos que hacer la decisión, tomar la decisión de seguir abierto o no seguir abierto. Pero el problema es que la agencia que nosotros utilizamos para conseguir sustitutos no tenían sustitutos disponibles porque la situación que estamos pasando aquí en esta escuela no es una situación que es específica nuestra, es una situación que está pasando por toda la ciudad. Hay un bajo número de sustitutos, entonces no hay para poder abrir la escuela.
Ms. Marquez, I think Sorry, I think we should also mention to what parents are thinking that this is not something that's spreading from one student to a teacher to one student. It's not spreading within our classrooms. That's not happening in OCS.
None
Sí,
of these cases are linked together.
También queremos aclarar que los casos no se están multiplicando en nuestra escuela. Los casos están aislados y están separados. Los dos casos que hemos podido detectar son casos que pasaron aislados y no tienen conexión, y tenemos la dicha, gracias, que no se ha multiplicado en la escuela.
As the OC administrative team, we wanted to do everything possible to get the students back in school because they were so excited to be back there, and we wanted education to continue the way it was a year and a half ago. So we decided we were going to take one day at a time to figure out what was the best next decision and see how many staff members were quarantining and if we could actually run the school.
Como equipo de administración, nosotros tenemos ¿cómo se dice? Estamos preocupados con que nosotros podamos abrir la escuela efectivamente. Queremos que los estudiantes vuelvan a las clases, que vuelvan a coger clases en persona. Entonces, como equipo, teníamos que determinar día a día qué íbamos a hacer. No queríamos tomar la decisión de cerrar la escuela en general de una vez, porque así entonces los estudiantes no iban a poder entrar a las clases, no van a coger la educación que nosotros creemos que se merecen. Y decidimos, vamos a cogerlo día a día, y cada día veíamos viendo que el número de profesores en cuarentena iba subiendo. Entonces, en ese momento tuvimos que hacer la decisión, que fue la última decisión que tomamos, de cerrar en general.
On Monday, when we looked at our options and saw how many teachers wouldn't be present for the next few days, we made a decision that since certain staff was quarantining, they would be able to deliver instruction remotely, which was better than having students come into the building and not have teachers. So in the best interest of your children, we made the decision to go remote through Friday so that at least your students can interface with teachers remotely.
Entonces, el lunes nos dimos cuenta que sería mejor tener las clases por internet que venir a la escuela, porque la realidad era que no teníamos profesores cual iban a estar en la clase para poder enseñar a sus hijos y mantenerlos con cuidado. Tuvimos que hacerlo por internet porque por lo menos, aunque los profesores estén en cuarentena, podían entonces dar las clases por internet, que era más auspicioso que traerlo a la escuela y no tener quien atenderlo en la escuela.
We are making these decisions out of an abundance of caution for you and your families and your child. And we do have full intention of returning to school on Monday, September 27th, because all quarantines will be over by then.
La decisión fue tomada por una abundancia de precaución para mantener a sus hijos y a los maestros en salud o con salud. Pero queremos comenzar la escuela otra vez el lunes que viene ahora, la semana que llega.
And now Ms. McCaw is going to take you through the steps of what happens with us, with the situation room and the flow chart of how the students and who are decided of who has to quarantine and who does not.
Ahora la señora McCall le va a enseñar una imagen que le va a delinear qué tenemos que hacer cuando los estudiantes están infectados en la clase y los pasos que tenemos que tomar para determinar si un estudiante tiene que quedarse en casa o si puede volver a la escuela.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm sure that some of you have maybe already seen this from Chalkbeat, but we saw this flow chart here. Sorry, my computer's freezing. for a bit, that really helps to explain what happens if there is a positive COVID case in a school. And this is something that all Department of Education schools follow, and we are a DOE charter school, so that means we also follow what these regulations are as well.
Los pasos delineados aquí son los pasos que tenemos que tomar como escuela de la ciudad de Nueva York para poder determinar si una ola cierra o no. Nosotros tomamos todas estas precauciones y son los pasos que tenemos que tomar cada vez que esto pase.
So what happens here is if we receive a COVID, you receive an alert that there was a COVID case at your school. The first question is your child a close contact? If your child was not a close contact, there is no further action that needs to be done. Your child continues to go to school as usual. If your child was a close contact, that means that they were in the same classroom as someone who tested positive. It then goes in to determine if they're middle school or high school, which that's what our school is, and if they're vaccinated or not. Ms. Hazel, do you want me to stop there and you translate?
Yes, please. Scroll up a little.
Okay, sure.
So, la primera pregunta es si su hijo o hija estuvo en contacto con una persona infectada con el COVID. Si eso se determina viendo la distancia de cómo estaban los estudiantes, entonces si su estudiante estuvo en esa aula y tuvo contacto con esa persona, entonces cae en el cuadro azul. Si no, nada pasa y seguimos adelante. Si cae en el cuadro azul, nos preguntan si el niño está en la secundaria o está en la intermedia, que es las escuelas que nosotros tenemos, no tenemos niños de elementaria. La segunda pregunta, la pregunta próxima es si su hijo está vacunado o no. Tenemos que determinar eso. Entonces seguimos abajo.
You know what, might as well go ahead and explain the whole thing, Ms. Hazel, if you want, and then I can go back and explain in English. Does that work?
Okay, good. Entonces, si está vacunado, sí, hay diferencias. Si está vacunado y no tiene síntomas, entonces pueden volver a la clase. Aquí dice si hay síntomas o no. Si hay síntomas, entonces nos dicen, go down a little.
Sorry, it's my computer keeps freezing. Here we go.
Si no hay síntomas y la niña está vacunado, el niño está vacunado, entonces pueden, dicen que se pueden estar en cuarentena por 3 o 5 días para tener precaución, pero no es necesario si tienen vacuna. Si el niño sí tiene síntomas de COVID y está vacunado, será requerido que esté en cuarentena por 10 días.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Hazel. So I can just go back here. And if any of you do have an elementary school age child, automatically that means that they will have to quarantine because the vaccination is not available for that age group. So if your child is vaccinated and they don't have symptoms, no, my child does not have symptoms, then they're not required to quarantine. Okay, but it says here that they do encourage you to get your child tested 3 to 5 days after exposure. If on the day of you're informed that your child is a close contact, getting a test on the day of is not going to give you any information. Waiting 3 to 5 days after and then getting a COVID test will turn out any results if there is any possible exposure for your child. And if your child does have COVID symptoms, whether they're vaccinated or not, they will have to quarantine for 10 days because no one who has symptoms will be allowed to go into the building. And this applies to students and staff. And so now, with this lovely flow chart to really help understand everything, the mayor did release a new ruling where, let me just make this a little bigger for you, did release a new ruling stating that any students that are distanced 3 feet or more and are masked, and they are previously were considered a close contact, they're in the same classroom, they will no longer be required to quarantine, even if they're not vaccinated. So they have to be 3 feet or more, they have to be masked, and if they fit those 2 requirements and they don't have symptoms, then your child will no longer have to quarantine. This goes into effect on September 27th. Okay, so that flow chart is going to change a little bit on who will have to quarantine and who will not have to quarantine, but just giving you all a heads up on a new ruling that will be effective September 27th.
Bueno, la imagen que acabamos de enseñar va a cambiar el 27 de septiembre y es porque el mayordomo de la ciudad pasó un nuevo reglamento que dice que si el estudiante está más de 3 pies y tiene mascarilla y llega a contactar o está en contacto con una persona que sale positiva de COVID, ese estudiante, aunque estuvo en contacto y aunque estuvo en la misma clase, tiene que volver a la escuela. No se va a poder mandar a cuarentena porque bajo el nuevo reglamento, si tienen 3 pies y hay mascarilla puesta, entonces el niño puede volver a la escuela.
Thank you, Ms. Hazel. And so just the last piece for me is that we are participating with additional testing offered by the Department of Education. So we have our own testing in which we are doing 25% of our population testing every week. And then we are also participating in Department of Education testing that we will be testing 10% of our students that are unvaccinated every week. So in all, our school will be having 35% of our population tested every week for COVID. If you've already signed consent for your child to participate in the saliva testing, and you want them to also be considered for this additional DOE testing, we will need a separate consent form signed by the parent or guardian of the child in order for them to participate in this. So our first testing will be on October 1st for the DOE testing. And this one is not a saliva test, it is a nasal test.
Estamos participando en las pruebas de COVID del Departamento de Educación. El Departamento de Educación está haciéndole prueba a 10% de los estudiantes que no están vacunados semanalmente. Adicionalmente, estamos también haciéndole pruebas 25% de nuestros estudiantes semanalmente en una rotación de 25% para hacer 100% mensualmente. Entonces, cuando uno combina las pruebas del Departamento de Educación, que son 10%, y las pruebas nuestras independientes, le estamos haciendo pruebas a 35% de nuestros estudiantes y maestros semanalmente en nuestra escuela.
Great. Okay, so the form will be sent out, so please check your emails. You will see a link to fill out a DocuSign consent form. You'll see it will have the Department of Education logo on it, our logo on it. So please fill that out as soon as possible when you receive it. We will also be printing out these consent forms and sending it home with your child on Monday, September 27th. So you can fill it out on paper as well if that's what your preference is, and just make sure that your child returns it back to the school to make sure they can participate.
Perdón, también estamos mandando un formulario de consentimiento nuevo. Si usted ya firmó el formulario de consentimiento para las pruebas nuestras, que son el 25%, también tienes que firmar el formulario de consentimiento de la ciudad y del Departamento de Educación. Así que tengan atención, vamos a mandar por correo electrónico y vamos a mandar también por papel. Por favor, llénenlo y mándenlo con su hijo para que podamos hacer la prueba del 10% del Departamento de Educación, igual la prueba nuestra que es 25%.
Thank you, Ms. Hazel.
Do you mind if I just answer one question that's important that came in the chat box? You do not have to do the DOE testing, correct? The DOE testing is only for unvaccinated students, and it's a consent form, so it's only if the parent consents to it.
La prueba del Departamento de Educación es solo para los estudiantes que no tienen vacuna y solo se le hace la prueba a sus hijos si ustedes dan consentimiento firmando el formulario.
Yes, and to answer a question that came in the chat, right, none of this testing is mandatory. However, we are encouraging as many students to participate in it in order for us to possibly prevent any school closures or classroom closures and things like that. But it is not mandatory, but strongly encouraged.
Ninguno de las pruebas son mandatorias. Lo estamos haciendo para prevenir los casos y mitigar las cierres de aulas y la cierre de la escuela, pero no es mandatorio. Sí les pedimos que por lo más posible que traten de hacerse la prueba.
Thank you. You're finished, Ms. McCall? Okay.
Yes.
So because we are out remote learning for the rest of this week and we cannot guarantee that this won't happen again in the future, we want to make sure that all of our students are prepared. Ms. Francis is ready to discuss with us the Chromebook and technology pickups.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. So none of us anticipated having to go remote the first week of school. So we understand if your child hasn't been able to make it to some of their remote classes up until this point. We did send out communication about a computer pickup at school this past Friday. There is a computer pickup, Chromebook pickup today until 2 o'clock. And in addition, tomorrow between the hours of 8 a.m. and 2 p.m.
Como no podemos determinar que esto no pasará otra vez y queremos que todos los estudiantes estén equipados con la tecnología necesaria para poder corresponder con sus profesores y coger clases por internet, mandamos cartas el viernes, cartas electrónicas, y hicimos llamadas para que los padres vinieran a recoger computadoras. Entre las horas de las 9 a 2 de la tarde. También estuvimos hoy dando computadora entre las horas de 9 a 2 de las tardes, y mañana igualmente estaremos a la misma hora haciendo disponibles las tabletas o lo que necesitan para poder atender a sus clases electrónicas.
Up until this point, we have not marked any student absent. So we've been very flexible with attendance, but we will start marking students absent from their live Google Classroom starting this Thursday.
Hemos estado bien flexibles en anotar los estudiantes presentes o ausentes, pero desde este jueves en adelante, todos los estudiantes que están requeridos estar en clase de Zoom con su maestro, sí se le va a coger ¿cómo se dice? Attendance, y le van a tomar notas si está ausente o presente.
Just to speak a little bit about expectations, if your child was at the school last year, classes are held the same. Students should follow their regular schedule and attend all classes on the hour. So each class is 45 minutes. They begin the school day at 8. They end their first class at 8:45. And then between each and every class, there's a 15-minute break, stretch period, and the classes resume on the hour. So I'll stop in 1 second. I just want to make sure the last thing I say is that during that hour, that 45 minutes, it is expected that your student is present and participating in the live Zoom classes. Sorry, Ms.
Vamos a seguir igual que como hicimos el año pasado. Los estudiantes tienen que seguir su rutina normal. Las clases del primer periodo es la clase del primer periodo. Las clases van a correr en 45 minutos. Entonces, cada clase es 45 minutos. Entre las clases, los estudiantes tienen 15 minutos. Y luego la próxima clase comienza a la hora que normalmente comenzaría en el edificio. Es igual como lo hicimos el año pasado, 45 minutos. Todos los estudiantes están requeridos a atender a su clase para que puedan conseguir, lo puedan marcar presente.
And if there's any issues with camera or an issue with not being able to Zoom with circumstances at home, it's just very important that you reach out to your child's social worker.
Si por cualquier circunstancia su hijo o hija no pueden prender su cámara, entonces tienen que comunicarse con las trabajadoras sociales para dejarnos saber y informarnos lo más pronto posible.
Thank you.
Parents, let us open this up to you guys now for questions, comments, anything you want. I see someone just wrote, so you're saying all staff are vaccinated. So let me address the all staff are vaccinated. There was an order put into place that all staff who work in the Department of Education building, which we do, have to have one shot by the 27th. And then there was some pushback on that. So the judge is making a decision on the 22nd, which is tomorrow. So as of tomorrow, we will know if that order is going through or not. So until that order goes through, you cannot mandate vaccine as a public, if you're in a public building.
So una pregunta es que si todos los maestros están vacunados. Hasta ahora hay un reglamento que pidió que los maestros y los trabajadores en edificios de la ciudad tengan la primera vacuna el 27 de septiembre. Pero hubo protestas sobre eso, entonces un juez va a decidir si eso se va a implementar mañana o no. Pero hasta ahora no podemos mandar que los maestros y las personas que trabajan en el edificio sean vacunados.
Thank you. We have a small audience right now joining us. So if you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself to ask your question. So this video will be downloaded and uploaded to the school's website as well as our social media accounts. So if you do know of another parent who was unable to join, please let them know that they can watch the video a little bit later on, as well as be on the lookout for the links for the DOE testing if you are the parent or guardian of an unvaccinated student, as well as just double checking to make sure that we at OCS have already received your consent form for our lab testing, which is the saliva test. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to anyone listed here on the team. And we hope that everyone stays safe, and we cannot wait for Monday to come so we can go back into the building and have our first week of school again. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.